And I think it could be good for people who are interested, people who look.
I guess the best horror film is what gets under your skin. Most American horror films nowadays are exceedingly traditional. You know, you have the fate-oriented horror film whereby you know that you're going to have a body count. Then you have the slasher film where you know you're also going to get a body count. But you also have we've stopped making the traditional monster movies. In the 1950s, you had all those atomic age monster films, which came out of Universal and AI. Oversized cockroaches, oversized tarantulas, oversized frogs. I mean, you name it, we got it. A horror genre can be anything from the traditional boogeyman, he's coming to get you sort of film, to psychological horror, which would be, I guess, more along the lines of something like Funny Games or Rosemary's Baby. In point of fact, I think that horror films work better on you when they touch base with something in your life, you know, some kind of primal fear. I particularly like the original version of Funny Games, which was one of these the film starts off very innocuously with this couple going back to a summer home, and some two fellows who look innocuous enough intrude on their space, and before long, basically they're putting the couple through hell, and by the time it's over, well, I don't want to give it away, but the long and the short of it is, it has to do with the fear of intrusion, the fear into our own space, the fear that the horror is really the very pleasant-faced guy next door sort of approach. The stuff nowadays is really not as potent as what we used to have because it sort of lacks context. I think most of the horror films nowadays are really not even targeted at the same audiences which were around in the 1980s, which were ostensibly the last real heyday of horror film production in the U.S. I think that horror basically comes out of the social climate at any given time. At least when you had writers and filmmakers who were interested in more than just trying to goose the audience a little bit. I mean, there were people around like William Castle who liked, who'd made films like House on Haunted Hill and The Tingler. These were movies which were just, simply designed as your old dark house sort of movies, where the main goal in making them was just to get the audience to jump around a little bit and to give them a bit of a roller coaster ride.
There was but one thing a responsible, trusted representative of the United States government could do at a time like this. Get out of there.
You can talk about social grounded horror, you can talk about creature-oriented horror, you can talk about, just the regular bug-eyed creature sort of horror. But in point of fact, they all have their places depending upon what you're actually trying to program. Every year we have something in the lineup which is really sort of the wild card in the bunch, something which they don't particularly know they're going to get. Last year's was really amusing, particularly with the inclusion of the movie Hausu, which is a really crazy Japanese live-action anime, which really caught the audience by surprise. A couple of years before that, we had a film called Night Warning, which was this completely innocuous, almost unknown film which had been playing at the Alamo Drafthouse in the Midwest, and it was recommended to us by one of the programmers there. And he said, "Put this on. I guarantee you by the time this is done, you're going to have people climbing the walls."
Oh, no!
By the time it was done, there were just people standing at the door, wild-eyed and absolutely agape that they had never heard or seen of this film. The films we're getting right now are actually remakes or retreads, which have been toned down or, homogenized. And they're not R-rated films anymore. They're generally PG-13 films, which have just been overall toned down for either younger audiences or generally female audiences. So it's really a very odd time in horror films nowadays. I don't think I'm terribly typical. My favorite horror film from the last couple of years is a piece of work called Martyrs, which came out of what we're calling the French new wave of horror. And the reason why that one gets under your skin is because it deals in areas where we're not accustomed to delving. The movie essentially has long sequences of brutality and torture in it. Not like Hostel, mind you, but it has, it basically has the torture of women, which as a means to enlightenment. In other words, the main character is put through hell, just to prove whether there is anything there really is any life after death. There are very few horror films nowadays which really have style. The last one I can think of, which was a truly beautiful horror film to look at, was Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula. I think that the best horror films come from from finding that one little item in a person's psyche, which is weak or vulnerable, and just kind of poking at it a bit. The 50s, like I said, you had your atomic era, giant bug and paranoia films like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. I personally love the Hammer series of horror films, which came out of the British film industry in the late 60s, early 70s. I'm a sucker for the Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, Michael Groh series of pictures. All of the horror, the Dracula films, which Christopher Lee made. I just adore them. They had style, they had class, they had color, they had ingenues, and basically they were an awful lot of fun. There were a lot of bang for the buck, and the filmmakers just really knew how to take the audience for a ride.